Hydromet Service says Guyana is experiencing the extremes of weather conditions due to the impacts of climate change, and that these extremes may only get worse for Guyana and the rest of the Caribbean. Chief Hydromet Officer of the Hydromet Service, an arm of the Ministry of Agriculture, Dr. Garvin Cummings, says the evidence is overwhelming that extremes in weather conditions is becoming more frequent. He pointed to the national disaster occasioned by flooding after a prolonged period of high-intensity rainfall in 2021, the more recent year-long period of drought-like conditions that ended a few months ago, and now the predicted above-normal temperatures from now until November, explaining that all these are the effects of global warming and rising sea levels.
Over the last few years, we've seen several extreme weather and climate events in Guyana that are really signals of the impending implications of climate change and climate variability. We recall in 2021 we had our greatest national disaster in terms of floods. Then we transitioned into a significant El Nino event which brought extremely dry conditions to Guyana. We have since transitioned into the rainy season, and now we're heading into another dry season. These events that we've seen, while perhaps they are global in scale, they've had significant local impacts and really are driven by climate change and what is being observed globally. In fact, the record will show that between 2000 to 2023, 19 of those years had extreme temperatures. We've seen right here in Guyana as well occasions where we've had extreme temperatures. In fact, we have, for the first time, recorded temperatures of 40 degrees Celsius in Guyana. The global conversation really is about 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius increase in temperatures. While these numbers seem very small, the impacts can be extremely severe and can cause significant damage to lives and livelihoods.
So over the years, Guyana's average temperature has gone up by 1 degree. Globally, scientists have said the world is on track to realize a 3-degree hike in temperature, a reality that would have catastrophic results for the world, more so for countries below sea level.
So scientists have done significant work with respect to climate change. And while we've had indications that there have been increases in temperature, in fact, the projections are suggesting that we can have as much as perhaps 3 degrees Celsius change. These appear to be small, but the impacts can be severe and devastating. We can look at the cryosphere, for example, or the ice caps and the glaciers. The melting of those can have significant changes in our ocean environment. Ocean and atmospheric interactions drive our local climate and weather. If the conditions of the ocean changes, it also means that weather patterns may change, climate may change. The impacts globally are recognized, but there are also significant impacts that we have to recognize and appreciate for us here locally in Guyana. Any change in sea level rise, for example, can have devastating impacts for our agriculture sector. We can lose significant areas of our fertile agricultural land. Significant housing areas can be lost as well if the conditions persist as we're currently seeing.
These global changes are what's driving the extreme variations about temperature and weather here in Guyana.
With that in mind, some of the conditions that we have been experiencing in Guyana are in fact linked to the global change in climate. We have experienced significant flood events in the last 3 years, the last 5 years, that can be linked to changes in atmospheric dynamics in weather and climate. On the other hand, we've also had extreme heat. In fact, right now we are forecasting significantly higher temperatures for the next 2 months in Guyana. While the temperature change might be, in our case as well, 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, the impacts are severe for agriculture, for public health, for tourism, and for the general human well-being. We've also, at the same time, with the significant increase in temperature, have also had several occasions where there were high intensity, short duration rainfall events that have devastated local areas. That is what we're expecting that climate change will bring to Guyana. We can now have a month's rainfall in a couple of days or perhaps even a few hours. On many occasions, we will have rainfall events that may last just for 1 hour, maybe two. And you can have a month's rainfall in that period of time. We can reflect on recent flood events in Linden, for example, Region 10, an area that is not typically prone to seasonal flooding, but because they had more than 5 inches of rainfall within a 12-hour space of time, several areas were flooded. If the land is left bare for areas like Linden, where there are sandy soils, or even for high-sloping areas, you can have significant earth movement or landslides, as we call them, which can devastate housing and even transportation and energy infrastructure. So these events are expected to increase as temperatures increase, and is really driven by the use of fossil fuel and natural changes in the environment as well.
The average temperature in Georgetown, for instance, is usually 34 degrees Celsius, but in periods of above normal temperature, it has been known to climb to 37 degrees, with some areas recording a blistering 40 degrees, as was the case at Ibini in the Berbice River.
So typically for our long dry season, which we are currently in right now, temperatures in some locations may go as far as 34 degrees Celsius. In the last year or so, we've seen temperatures going way beyond that. In some cases, 35, 36 degrees, and in the case of Ibini, even 40 degrees Celsius. So we have to be prepared for this type of, this level of increase in temperatures that might be short-lived, but the impacts can be severe and long-lasting. What do we do to prepare for this type of, or this increase in temperature?
The Hydromet Service is advising on a number of critical measures that can be implemented to mitigate against the extreme temperatures currently being experienced across Guyana.
So with increasing temperature at the individual level, we have to ensure that we remain hydrated all the time. Ensure that we have a good supply of water, that we are constantly hydrating, that we are wearing the appropriate clothing as well. Loose clothing would be appropriate. If you have to do outdoor activities, you should schedule those for times of the day when it is cooler, or if you have to be out there, if you're into construction or farming, you may want to take regular breaks in a shaded area so that you're not exposed to the heat for a very long period of time. You'll want to ensure that you improve the ventilation in your home. When the sun is on those windows, you may want to pull the curtains, for example, to ensure that the heat is kept out. For schools, you may want to think about getting the children outdoor, or ensuring that you encourage them as well to consume a lot of liquids. You may want to open those windows up as well. The high-risk groups here are really children, the elderly, and those who may have some chronic illnesses that might be triggered by increases in temperature. So staying hydrated, ensuring that you avoid the hotter times of the day, and to ensure that you wear appropriate clothing. For animals, we have to also ensure that they remain hydrated and they have access to shaded areas as well, and these are areas with high ventilation. From a wider public health perspective, dry conditions generally mean an increase in dust and aerosols in the atmosphere. So persons who are suffering from respiratory illnesses will have to take the necessary precautions as well. If it means that you're going to have to wear a mask to protect yourself, you may need to do so. There might also be cases where you will have stagnant water, and increase in temperature may be suitable for the proliferation of mosquitoes, which can trigger increases in malaria and dengue cases as well. But as the season persists, you'll expect that those stagnant bodies of water will evaporate, and that threat will be reduced. For southern Guyana, it is perhaps can be even more severe, because coastal Guyana, we are expecting that by November, the secondary rainy season will begin. In the case of southern Guyana, the Rupununi savannas, their rainy season is until next May. So you're talking about 6 to 7 months of continuous dry conditions, and therefore we have to pay careful attention to what is happening in those communities as well to ensure that they have access to clean water for their own consumption.
I asked Dr. Cummings what can we expect coming after this dry, heated period. He said there will be the re-emergence of La Nina conditions, or above normal rainfall.
So once we get out of this dry season in November, middle of November, we'll go into the secondary rainfall season. But that rainy season will be augmented by the emergence of a La Nina phase, which in fact is likely to bring above normal rainfall for the country, especially northern Guyana, which will be going into that secondary rainfall season. So this again underscores the extremes that we can have. We're having extreme temperatures, and we're at the same time projecting extreme rainfall triggered by La Nina for the last the last 2 months of the year, going into the first quarter of 2025. So we're having these rapid change in weather conditions from extremely dry to extremely wet. And this, in fact, is what we expect that climate change will bring. At the same time, climate change will also intensify tropical storm activities, which means that the storms will become more intense and even bigger. This would trigger increase in storm surges, which then poses a threat to our sea and river defense and to our potable water supply along the coast, for which over 75% are provided from groundwater sources. If we have increase in sea level and storm surges, it means that our saltwater lens would move further inland, posing a direct threat to the supply of fresh water from our aquifers along the coast.
In an invited comment, Agriculture Minister Zulfikar Mustafa stressed that government is committed to putting in the resources necessary to shore up the nation's sea defenses and has been expending billions to ensure drainage is expanded to mitigate against the high-intensity rainfall and other manifestations of climate change impacts on Guyana.
Now, there are a number of initiatives that we have started with, and you know for a fact that we are also doing the Hoop-like canal, the high-level canals that will help us tremendously. I'm hoping that majority of those projects will be completed before the year next year, or the last quarter of next year. But what we have been doing over the last few years that we have started, especially since I became Minister of Agriculture, we did a number of interventions across the country. We have put in new pump stations, we have rehabilitated canals, we have did embankment across the country, we have shored up the vulnerable areas, and what we have done now, I think we have the capacity to withstand the incoming dry spell. We know for a fact that not so long ago we came out of a dry spell, almost a year dry spell, and a lot of persons doubt our ability at that time. They doubted our ability to have production at the maximum. And I want to use one area, Region 2. Region 2 normally cultivate between 30 to 32,000 acres of rice. And the last crop that we have had the dry spell, many persons said that SQ will not, or Region 2 will not cultivate any rice because of the water situation. And with our intervention and the system that we have put in place, we were able to cultivate the largest crop in SQ during that period, 34,000 acres. And that shows our resilience, that shows our commitment, that shows the investment that the government is making. So we are prepared. We have been shoring up a number of vulnerable areas. We have our conservancies, them are in order, and I think the water storage capacity, we have, I think for now we have enough water to withstand this period of the dry spell, the intended dry spell. But we are still having some rainfall, and I'm hoping that we will not have a total dry spell, but the heat will be intense, as the Hydromet office would have advised us. And I think that precautions should be taken, especially with animals that are in the open areas, and so we have to ensure that we put system in place so that we can alleviate the problems that they will be facing.